everyone, today I'm going to talk about learning the Harpejji. How easy is it to learn this instrument? What if you already know how to play guitar? What if you already know how to play piano? What if you don't know any instruments? What are the similarities and differences, and how quickly can you pick this instrument up? So yeah, let's get into it. So let's start with the easiest question first, which is what if you have no musical background at all? Is this an easy instrument to learn, and is it a good instrument to get started with? So if you're brand new to music, this is a really easy instrument to get started with. In my opinion, it's easier than learning piano, it's easier than learning guitar, and obviously I have a bit of a bias because I already know how to play these instruments, so I can't learn the Harpejji for the first time without having this knowledge, because I have this knowledge. But the reason I think it's an easier instrument to learn is just the uniformity of it. So every string is a whole step apart, every fret is a half step apart. It's a perfect grid, which means the shapes of the scales, the shapes of the chords are all the same. So if you know one major chord, you know all the major chords. If you know one minor scale, you know all the minor scales. A flat minor is the same as C minor. Shape-wise, you just start on a different note. So it's really easy to get started just because of the layout. It's a huge benefit, whereas with the guitar and with the piano, there are non-uniform elements to it. For example, the distance between the fourth and the fifth string of the guitar is a major third apart, whereas the distances between the other strings is a fourth apart. Same with on the piano. Since there's no sharp or flat between E and F or between B and C, all the shapes of scales that you're playing change. With the Harpejji, that's not the case. Everything is perfectly uniform. Now, there are two things you might want to consider just before you go out buy a Harpejji as your first instrument. The first is available resources. It's not a popular instrument. So if you go to YouTube and you just type in how to play the guitar for beginners, I'm sure you'll find 1,000 videos that teach you how to play the guitar. That's not the case with the Harpejji. So you're going to have to put in a bit more legwork. There's certainly enough resources out there to explain the layout and explain how the instrument works. But as far as just, learning a basic song, nobody's really teaching this is how you play Piano Man. You got to kind of learn the music and adapt it to the Harpejji, which could be a little bit intimidating if you're brand new to music. The other reason I might recommend considering an alternative if you're brand new to music is just the cost. You can easily go and pick up a guitar or a keyboard for 10% of the cost of a Harpejji, just to make sure that you're really interested in learning music. It's really something you want to get into. However, if you are serious about getting into music and you have the budget for it and you don't mind putting in the legwork, it really is a great instrument to get started with. You'll really start to recognize patterns, how a major chord is shaped, how a minor chord is shaped. These things are really important in music, and the Harpejji does a great job of reinforcing those concepts and helping you learn them. Okay, so what if you already know guitar? What if you already know piano? It is going to be easier to learn the instrument for sure if you know one of these two instruments. I will say, however, without question, the piano gives more of an advantage to learning this instrument than the guitar does. But there are some things that translate better from guitar, and there are some things that translate better from piano. So if you already know how to play the guitar, there's really two unique advantages that you'll have for learning the Harpejji that a piano player or somebody that's new to music is not going to have. The feel for doing solos in terms of bending and sliding, and actually percussion. So what does that mean? For me, guitar solos and piano solos have a very different feel to them. I feel like the guitar solos, you might have a riff that you really like on the guitar, some tools in your tool belt, just like this sounds like a good riff, and you can translate that over to the Harpejji and it'll generally usually sound good. With the piano, sometimes I'll notice that some things in my tool belt, like for example, if I were to play something like a riff like that or something, when you go to try to translate that to the Harpejji, you can do it, but it doesn't sound, something sounds a little bit off, so I usually end up changing the riffs a little bit. Whereas if you take a guitar riff and just play it on the Harpejji, it'll pretty much always sound good because the Harpejji basically is a 24 string wide necked guitar, and that's something that an experienced guitar player is definitely going to draw an advantage from. The other thing that I think is a huge advantage, actually even a bigger advantage for guitar players, is percussion. So just to give a quick example, this kind of muted slap sound is very common in guitar, to play it during chord progressions or to play it during a melody line. It's in a lot of popular songs. So just a quick example. That slapping sound, slap, bum, bum, bum. That's something that's really common for guitar playing, and it's very foreign for piano playing, at least for most piano players. and it translates incredibly well to the Harpejji. So I actually played the same song on the Harpejji, and I initially learned it without that percussive element. I just kind of learned the order of the notes and kind of figured out the layout, and that took the vast majority of the time. Adding in that percussive element was super easy. It took maybe 10-15 minutes just to kind of get used to doing it with my left hand, but the feeling of when to do it and just the flow of everything came very natural to me just because it's second nature on the guitar. It just translates really well to the Harpejji, and I'm pretty sure it would have been much more difficult had I only played piano and not guitar, so that's something that translates really well. Now, things that don't necessarily translate well from guitar over to the Harpejji. The layout is very different between the guitar and the Harpejji. Generally, when you're playing the guitar, you're thinking about what fret you're on. That's not at all the case with the Harpejji. You never think I'm on the 7th fret of a C string or something like that. The notes all have individual note markers, so you're just kind of seeing the note as the note, just the way you would on a piano. Also, strumming does not translate from guitar to Harpejji at all, 0%. First of all, if you're right-handed, you're going to be strumming the guitar with your right hand. Generally speaking, you're going to want to strum the mid-range and high-range notes more often than the low-range notes, so you're going to end up getting used to strumming with your left hand. And for guitar players that are right-handed, strumming with your left hand is very unnatural. Also, the positioning of the guitar is this nice upright ergonomic feel. When you're strumming on the Harpejji, it's kind of this like Karate Kid wax on, wax off, weird windshield wiper motion. It's just very awkward and it doesn't translate at all. Furthermore, when you're strumming a chord, a lot of the times you'll strum some open strings and some strings that you're playing. There is no concept of an open string on the Harpejji. When you strum it open, it doesn't make a sound. It's all muted. It only actually makes a sound when you make contact between the string and the fretboard. So there is no strumming of open strings. There's only the notes that you play. That's what you get. But basically, those are the general points of what will translate well from guitar over to Harpejji and what won't. So, how easy is it to learn this instrument if you already know piano? It's definitely much easier than if you already know guitar because you're going to be much more familiar with the layout of the notes. And it's not exactly the same. There are two major differences between the layout of the piano and the layout of the Harpejji. First of all, on the piano, the notes are staggered kind of in a zigzag, so the sharps and flats are between natural notes. On the Harpejji, they're directly above each other in a perfect grid. There's no offset of notes, which seems like a minor thing, but it is a little bit weird to get used to. And the other thing is that a piano is laid out perfectly horizontally all the way across. With the Harpejji, you kind of see it as a series of diagonal pianos stacked on top of each other. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's just the way you'll start to think about it. But those are the two main differences. It probably takes a month or so to get used to the layout. If you're used to playing melodies and chords in your right hand and basses in your left hand, that's all the same. One thing that is a little bit different is just the fingers that you use to play. I find that I'm not so accurate with my pinkies, and that's probably just because I'm not well practiced at the Harpejji yet. And also I find that I use my thumbs a lot less. I still definitely use them a lot, but I use them a lot less than I do on the piano, and I rely on my middle three fingers on each of my hands a lot more. Also, when I was just getting started, it did actually hurt my right thumb a lot, just because I'm used to playing chords where the root is on my thumb. And when you play with your thumb, you kind of play with the side of your thumb just below the nail. And that part of your finger is just not used to being pressed against a metal string. So after maybe an hour or so of playing it, when I first got it, I had to take a break just because it was painful. But after a week or so, you kind of just get used to it and it doesn't hurt anymore. So it's not really an issue. But playing on strings is definitely something that is a challenge for a piano player. The keys on the piano are nice and wide. You don't need to be super accurate. With the Harpejji, you do need to be accurate. That's a disadvantage, but also an advantage of the Harpejji. You do have to be more accurate, but because the strings are smaller and closer together, you have a much bigger, I don't want to say wingspan, but your hand can access more notes from your pinky to your thumb. So an octave on the piano is basically 2 octaves on the Harpejji, which means it's really easy to play like 10th or a 12th interval all just on your left hand, which is really nice because it's something that is much more difficult or impossible to do on the piano. So you have a lot more flexibility in your two hands for what they can reach, but you do need to be more accurate, and that's something that takes time to get used to, and I'm still not used to it. Like I said, my pinkies are not accurate. I often miss the string, or I'll hit between 2 strings, or I'll hit the edge of a string and it won't make a clean, nice sound. As far as sliding and bending and those types of things go, that's probably the main attraction for a piano player to start playing the Harpejji. It's very easy. play it for a day and you'll get used to bending and sliding. It's really that easy. So yeah, very easy instrument to learn. If you're on the edge of whether or not you should buy it and you're not sure how quickly you'll be able to pick it up, the answer is quickly. It's just not a hard instrument to learn. If you want an example of this, you can go check out my first video that I made. That was a video where I did an unboxing briefly, and then it's just my first 2 hours playing the Harpejji, and during that time I learned some chords, some scales, major scale, blues scale, and then I learned how to play Blackbird. Not great, but I learned how to play it enough that I can get through the verses and the chorus. But yeah, easy instrument to learn, highly recommend it. So that's it for this video. If you guys do have any questions about learning this instrument or anything about the Harpejji, or if there's a topic you want me to talk about, the buying process, the customization of the Harpejji, just a general review of the product, tips, tricks, anything, just let me know in the comment section and I will make sure to answer them. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps me out a lot. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.